A woman drags a corpse and takes it to the basement, where she starts cutting it. Who is this ruthless woman? We'll find out in this movie. The film begins with a couple escaping through a basement door. The scene then shifts to a gas station, where Liz and Chad notice an arguing couple. Liz and Chad are on a pre-wedding trip, with their wedding scheduled for the next day. As they drive, Chad's car radio stops working and the vehicle starts sputtering. The car comes to a halt, and Liz storms out, followed by Chad, who starts exercising to lighten the mood, while Liz walks into a nearby field in frustration. Chad follows her, trying to reassure her that it's his responsibility to keep her happy. During their conversation, Liz realizes that their car has vanished. Where did it go? Who took it? How will their trip unfold after such a rocky start? Let's see what happens next. After losing their car, Liz and Chad start walking, with Liz growing increasingly frustrated and upset, especially since her wedding dress was in the car. They soon come across a car driven by Clem, who offers them a ride while chewing pon. Chad tries to decline, but Liz accepts and sit with him. Chad reluctantly joins, awkwardly perching on the back with Susie, Clem's unseen but box-confined dog. As they drive, Clem discusses weddings with Liz, suggesting she deserves a proper one. However, his frequent spitting of pan juice becomes annoying for Liz. As they drive, the car passes a sign that reads "Zombies Repellent," a clear indication that they've entered a zombie-infested area. The question now is, what fate awaits them? Will they manage to survive the zombies, or will they become the undead's next victims? Let's find out. Upon arriving in Vegas, Clem drops off Liz and Chad, referring them to Tommy, the area's best mechanic. Clem assures them that Tommy can fix their car. Tommy emerges from the garage, showcasing a plethora of colorful tattoos on his body. Liz expresses concern about her belongings, and Tommy informs her that everything is under the sheriff's control. Liz then asks Tommy for a phone call, then heads to the office as per Tommy's allowance. However, when she tries to call New York, the operator tells her that the phone only allows local calls within the town, and outside calls are not possible. Frustrated, Liz hangs up and shakes the phone before walking away. Outside, Liz tells Chad that she couldn't make the call. They then ask Tommy for the sheriff's office address. Liz wants to use her phone, but due to the town's no-tech policies, cell phones aren't allowed. Their car is parked in the garage, and Tommy promises to fix it by tomorrow afternoon. However, they need a place to stay, as there are no hotels in town. Tommy suggests staying overnight at Mrs. Powell's house on Devil's Hill. Liz, increasingly stressed, heads to the police department with Chad following behind. Upon arrival, they find the sheriff's office closed, with a sign indicating it won't reopen until 9 a.m. the next morning. This adds to their frustration, especially with their wedding looming. They decide to head to Mrs. Powell's house, where they're greeted by the arrogant woman Mrs. Powell, who emerges from the house with a cane, as if expecting them. Chad tries to speak, but Mrs. Powell interrupts, allowing them to stay overnight on the condition that they follow her house rules. As they enter the house, the door closes behind them. Mrs. Powell explains the rules. If they're unmarried, they'll have to spend the night in separate rooms. Chad mentions they're engaged, but Mrs. Powell insists on separate rooms, emphasizing her point by tapping her cane. Additional rules include dinner being served at 7 p.m., lights out at 10 p.m., and the rooms must be vacated by 9 a.m. the next morning. Mrs. Powell comes across as strict, but does offer a positive note. She won't charge them for her hospitality. Mrs. Powell leaves, mentioning her daughter Ellie Mae will show them to their rooms. Ellie Mae introduces herself, and Liz snuggles up to Chad, introducing him as her fiancé. They follow Ellie Mae upstairs, where she's shown to her room and Chad to his. Ellie Mae flirts with Chad while showing him his room. After Ellie Mae leaves, Liz expresses her disapproval to Chad. When Chad enters his room, his gaze falls on a disturbing painting hanging on the wall, and he approaches it. During dinner, Liz looks at her drink strangely and then gazes oddly at the meal, which is served by Mrs. Powell. Then Mrs. Powell asks Chad to say grace before eating, but he declines. However, Liz persuades him to participate. As they hold hands and begin the prayer, Ellie playfully kicks Chad's leg, causing him to make funny poses. The prayer ends with strange noises, which Mrs. Powell and Ellie attribute to squirrels. Liz uses this as an excuse to decline eating, claiming she's a vegetarian. Meanwhile, Ellie becomes excited about eating more. In the next scene, Chad steps out of his room and whispers to Liz, who emerges wearing a nightdress that was provided for her in her room, but Chad wasn't given the same courtesy. Liz expresses her unease, suggesting they should leave due to her growing discomfort. Chad tries to calm her down, but their conversation is interrupted by Mrs. Powell, who questions them about breaking the rules. Chad justifies their actions, insisting they were just talking and nothing more. Mrs. Powell orders them back to their rooms. Once inside, Chad becomes fixated on the painting again, while Liz sits in her room, bored, and reads a book. She then hears a dragging noise, gets up, and looks out the window, only to see Mrs. Powell dragging what appears to be a body. Horrified, Liz quickly goes downstairs and exits the house. On the other hand, Chad quietly enters Liz's room and lies down beside her. But instead of Liz, he finds Ellie sleeping there. Chad quickly gets up, turns on the lamp, and shines it on Ellie. He's surprised to see Ellie in Liz's place and asks her why she's there. Ellie explains that she was trying to protect them from her mother's anger for breaking the rules, as she had taken Liz's place after Liz left. Chad tells Ellie to get dressed up and meet him outside in 10 minutes, then sets out to find Liz. We then see Liz, who has left the house and is secretly watching from the basement. Inside, Mrs. Powell is cutting up a body with a saw. Just as Liz is observing, she's startled by the arrival of a police officer who questions her about what she's doing there. Liz explains that she's staying at the house and was just investigating strange noises. The police officer starts to investigate, asking about the type of noises, such as chewing sounds or something else, acting experienced. However, Liz didn't hear any such sounds. She heard dragging noises which Mrs. Powell was making. When Liz points towards the basement, Mrs. Powell is no longer there, possibly hiding after seeing Liz. Now, it's uncertain what Mrs. Powell will do next, considering she's aware of Liz's presence. Let's see what unfolds. The police officer wants to take Liz with him, not to arrest her, but to retrieve her phone and wedding dress. However, they need to hurry because the officer has to deliver a crazy man named Carl to jail. Liz wants to call her fiancé, but the officer refuses, citing time constraints. Liz accompanies the officer in her nightdress. After they leave, Chad exits the house and starts looking for Ellie, who was initially absent, but suddenly appears behind him, startling Chad. In the police car, Liz meets Carl, who is handcuffed in the back seat. Meanwhile, Chad and Ellie are searching for Liz. While in the car, Liz discusses her first meeting with Chad, mentioning that he didn't give her a romantic gift like a diamond ring, instead giving her tennis shoes and a t-shirt. When the sheriff goes to retrieve Liz's belongings, Carl asks for help, requesting Liz to remove his handcuffs, but she refuses. Suddenly, the sheriff starts growling and attacking the car window like a zombie, prompting Liz to flee. The sheriff tries to grab Carl through the window, and Carl asks Liz for help. She quickly returns, opens the backseat door, and Carl escapes. They both run away as the sheriff stumbles out of the car. On the other side, Ellie and Chad enter a cafe, where Ellie meets Tommy. They enjoy drinks while Chad remains focused on finding Liz. When Ellie and Tommy start dancing, a man named Larry approaches Chad, warning him that he should leave quickly or they will arrive. Chad is confused, unsure who Larry is referring to. Larry's wife intervenes, scolding him for frightening the customer. Tommy and Ellie also advise Chad not to pay attention to Larry's warnings, while Liz and Carl run until they reach a point where they stop. Carl tells Liz about zombies, explaining that they attacked the sheriff, turning him into a zombie. Liz is skeptical, unsure if zombies exist. Carl asks her to spit on his handcuffs to unlock them. Although Liz is hesitant, she eventually spits on the cuffs, which makes both of them feel nauseous. However, it works, and Carl is freed from his handcuffs. Meanwhile, Ellie and Chad have left the cafe to search for Liz. On their way, Ellie shares a story about a person at a carnival on Highway 67, where she went every year. This person would always stick his head into a gator's mouth, until one day the gator crushed his head like a melon. Carl begins to explain more about zombies to Liz, but only on the condition that she won't tell anyone about it. In 1850, mining began along the river, bringing prosperity and wealth to the town. However, by 1906, a group of miners discovered a highly toxic substance oozing from the rocks, which proved deadly to those exposed. The boss, noticing strange changes in the miners, decided to seal the mine by blowing it up. Everyone assumed the miners were dead, but they were actually alive, undead, transformed. Years later, in 1972, a wealthy developer from New York arrived to build a gambling resort near the river. Many workers fell victim to the undead miners, prompting the developer to seal the mine and leave. However, some of the undead miners, now zombies, managed to escape into the town, and their numbers gradually increased. On the other side, Ellie continues talking to Chad when suddenly a zombie appears behind him. Ellie quickly sprays repellent and kills the zombie. Meanwhile, Carl and Liz, walking in the dark, reach a pole. Carl asks Liz to climb up and retrieve a bag hanging from it. Carl stands by the pole, but Liz struggles to climb. Carl then brings a box to help Liz climb more easily. However, Liz suggests that Carl should stand on the box instead, allowing him to reach the bag more easily. This works, and Carl retrieves the bag. When Carl opens the bag, they find a zombie repellent, which locals use to protect themselves, and a bottle of moonshine. This discovery could be crucial for their survival. On the other side, Chad and Ellie are searching for Liz, but they can't find her because Liz is actually with Carl. They decide to head to an old church to escape the zombies. However, a zombie suddenly appears behind Carl and attacks him. Liz, holding the bag, runs away in fear, but another zombie woman emerges from the side and approaches her. Liz tries to spray repellent on the zombie, but it doesn't work. The zombie gets closer and closer to Liz, who falls to the ground. Just as the zombie is about to attack, Tommy appears and sprays repellent on the zombie, saving Liz. However, Tommy sees that Carl has already fallen victim to the zombies. Tommy tells Liz to come with her, explaining that Chad is searching for her. Liz gets into Tommy's car, where she learns that Chad has been searching for her all night with Ellie. Liz looks a bit insecure, but Tommy reassures her that Chad is not Ellie's type. Chad and Ellie are still searching for Liz when Ellie tries to cast doubt on Chad and Liz's relationship. Ellie shares a story about her past affair, where she had planned a wedding and 7 babies with someone, but he died in a train accident. However, she later discovered that he was involved with someone else, and Ellie believes he deserved to die. As they're talking, a zombie approaches Chad from behind, and he becomes frightened. But he quickly sprays repellent and knocks the zombie out. The two decide to head to the church, where Tommy and Liz have already arrived. Tommy discovers the bag and is excited to find the moonshine drink inside. She takes a sip and feels relaxed, then offers some to Liz. While Chad's telling Ellie about Liz, that Liz will become emotional and vomit if she drinks more than one sip. But now, Liz takes a drink, and as predicted, Liz starts vomiting and becomes emotional, much to Chad's dismay. Tommy, feeling sorry for Liz, stays by her side despite feeling unwell herself. Chad and Ellie arrive at the church, where they're met with zombies. However, Chad isn't afraid this time and takes charge, spraying repellent to knock the zombies out. Then both enter the church, where Tommy and Liz are waiting. Chad rushes to hug Liz, who's still emotional from drinking the moonshine. She starts discussing their future, mentioning that she doesn't want more babies due to their financial situation, which could lead to custody issues. Chad calms her down. Liz then steps outside and sees their car with her wedding dress hanging outside. Excited, she rushes to grab the dress, but as she's looking at it, a zombie emerges from behind the car door. Terrified, Liz falls to the ground and starts screaming. The zombie is about to overpower Liz when Chad bursts out of the church and pulls the zombie away. Tommy and Ellie arrive, and they spray repellent to knock the zombie out. Liz is left holding her ruined wedding dress, crying hysterically. Chad sits with Liz in the car, who's devastated about her ruined wedding dress. Ellie tries to comfort her, offering to buy a new dress. Meanwhile, Tommy notices that Liz's engagement ring is missing, and Liz remembers leaving it at Mrs. Powell's house. They decide to return to Mrs. Powell's house to retrieve the ring. After they leave, Ellie makes a mysterious phone call. Chad and Liz arrive at the house, and Liz quietly searches her room for the ring but can't find it. She then tells Chad about seeing Mrs. Powell cutting up a dead body in the basement. Just as she's sharing this, Mrs. Powell appears holding a gun, furious, then cuffs Chad and Liz, locking them in the basement as punishment for breaking the house rules. Not only that, but Mrs. Powell has a zombie named Jimmy, who is actually her son, who turned into a zombie at the age of 17. She's been keeping him in the basement, where there are jars filled with blood and body parts. As morning approaches, Jimmy starts to stir, and Liz uses Carl's trick to spit on the cuffs and escape. They unlock the basement door and make a run for it. After that, Liz and Chad head back to the car, but Chad suddenly stops and examines the zombie repellent can. Liz becomes stressed, but Chad discovers that the can is actually filled with hairspray, revealing that someone had used it for personal amusement. Chad decides to investigate further and returns to the garage, where they learn that Tommy doesn't work there. They then visit the sheriff's office, which is also for sale. Then they arrive at Mrs. Powell's house, where there's a brief disagreement between Chad and Liz because Chad forgot their wedding day. As they're arguing, they hear people laughing and chatting outside. They look out the window and see Mrs. Powell, the sheriff, Carl, Tommy with no tattoos, and Clem enjoying a meal and mocking Chad and Liz. Ellie comes in to pour drinks. Then they all join the others outside. Liz becomes furious when she discovers that everything was just an act for paying visitors. The group reveals their real names and professions, but Liz storms off with Ellie following her. After a while, Liz returns, calms down, and agrees to marry Chad. They get married at the church, but just as the ceremony begins, a zombie enters the church. However, the sheriff stops it, saying the act is over. The zombie is revealed to be Larry, the man who warned Chad at the cafe. The movie ends with this scene. Like, share, and subscribe for more. Stay updated and hit the notification bell.